Welcome to Clothes Horse, the podcast that, well, until an hour ago, didn't have running water. And that's one of the reasons this week's episode is coming out a little bit late. But the good news is we do have running water now. It was a whole thing. We've had a really, really cold few days, and we live in a rented farmhouse on a much larger farm with barns and many barns, 3 of them, and fields, and I guess also a very complicated water/well system. This house is from the 1890s, so things are complicated. Something broke, and finally, after the guy who came to take a look at the situation, he was literally driving from barn to barn, going back and forth across the road, dealing with some goats, all kinds of stuff. He finally fixed it for us. So now we have water, and I'm really excited because I was like, okay, well, maybe Christmas is ruined, and all the food I bought for Christmas, how are we going to cook it because we don't have water? Anyway, crisis averted. So far, could change. Christmas not ruined. Anyway, I'm your host, Amanda, and this is episode 221. And as I mentioned in last week's episode with Sushmita of Ethical Fat Fashion, the next few episodes are part of a series about inclusivity within the slow fashion movement. Because the reality is this: in order to dismantle fast fashion and all of the egregious waste, human exploitation, and harm to our planet that comes with it, we must get most people to adopt a slow fashion way of life. And as we have discussed here many times, each person's version of slow fashion can and will look differently, right? There are all these different components of it. It's shopping secondhand first. It's making clothes and really everything else last as long as possible with care and repair. It's sewing and making our own clothing and all of our stuff if you want to. It can also just be you're making pickles, which I, do myself. It can be upcycling and repurposing. It can be shopping from ethical brands and small businesses, especially if they're local. And it just generally being really mindful of the stuff in our lives, how long it's in our lives, and where it goes when we're done with it. No matter what combination of things a person chooses as part of their version of slow fashion, it all results in changing our relationship with stuff, right? Whether that's clothing or throw pillows, lipsticks, whatever it is, we are over-consuming. And as part of changing that relationship with stuff, everyone will be buying less new stuff in the first place because the stuff will be better, right? And we'll be taking care of it longer. And sometimes we'll just buy secondhand stuff. And it's also just sort of changing where that stuff comes from, right? It's a lot. In my opinion, slow fashion should be everything that regular old-fashioned, which is essentially almost completely fast fashion at this point, is not. It should be inclusive, diverse, welcoming, fun, and creative. It's not about selling a commodity. It's about making people feel good, making them feel included and excited and confident. It's about fun and exploration for all people of all sizes and genders and ages and backgrounds. The very definition of inclusivity is including all types of people. Everybody is welcome in the slow fashion movement. And yes, slow fashion has made a lot of progress towards a more welcoming and inclusive community over the past few years. It has changed so much since I started making Clothes Horse in 2020, and I'm so glad for that. It still has a long way to go. Until everyone can see themselves as part of it, we will not be successful in our work toward a better future because we need this critical mass of people on board, right? And we need a lot of people, and that means it's a lot of different people. So I wanted to end this year and begin next year with conversations about where we are with a more inclusive slow fashion community and where we should go next. I think 2025 is going to be a pivotal year in so many ways, including I think we're going to see a large social trend away from Amazon and Temu and Shein. I think people are just getting sick of it. I think they're finally starting to see that these places are not actually selling very good deals, no matter how low the prices are. And that really, in a kind of roundabout way, these companies are actually kind of ripping everyone off, right? And these are things that you and I already know, but I think I actually see this becoming a more mainstream conversation right now, which bodes really well for 2025. I think we are seeing, although maybe you don't feel like you're seeing it right now, a large social shift into shopping small and local. And I will tell you, not to brag, but all of my small business clients are having the best year that they ever had. And part of that is, yes, like strategy and putting systems in place and things like that. But it's also that people, I think, are really starting to come around to this, that there is more quality, more longevity, and just like better vibes attached to shopping from smaller brands. That said, there are still plenty of people who are shopping from Amazon, Shein, and Temu, and we need to steer those people away. I also think, because we're already seeing it this year, I think we're going to see even more of this next year. We're seeing even more people getting into mending and shopping secondhand, making their own clothing. We're seeing these ideas that have been kind of in our slow fashion bubble becoming more mainstream. This is a really big deal. It's easy, I know I feel this way a lot, to feel as if you're drowning in bad news right now, but I want you to know that if you sort of put down your phone, close whatever news site or news app you're reading right now, and actually look around you, these things are happening and there are things to feel optimistic about. I know it's hard. Trust me. I have to have a talking to with myself just about every day about this. I will tell you that another really good sign that tells me that 2025 is going to be a big year of progress is that people are finally getting sick of the egregiously low quality clothing currently offered by most retailers. And with enough of them getting sick of that, getting fed up, it's going to force these brands to do better. And these conversations are also becoming way more widespread, way more mainstream. And when these sorts of social trends develop, that's how we see actual permanent change happening, like systemic change. So that's pretty exciting to me too. And I also think we're starting to see legislation passing, like the Fashion Act, that will finally regulate this entire industry that is out of control. The legislative session in New York starts in just a few weeks, and we are getting ramped up to do a ton of work to pass the Fashion Act this year. Well, when I say this year, I mean 2025, but it's basically 2025 now. And I feel that getting that legislation passed is going to have a domino effect of more and more states doing the same. California is already in conversations with all the people working on the Fashion Act to get similar legislation going there. And if we could get New York and California to pass this kind of legislation, we're going to see systemic change within the fashion industry. So yeah, I feel really hopeful that we're about to see some major change happen next year, because we're already seeing promising momentum moving forward, right? Even just in the last few weeks, we see Starbucks and Amazon workers on strike right now as I'm recording this. We see more media outlets talking about the low quality of clothing. They're talking about Shein. They're talking about fast fashion. They're talking about how unreliable product on Amazon is, and so much more. This is a big deal. When your aunt or your grandma starts talking to you about Shein or Temu or Amazon, it's a move in the right direction. And we also are seeing more and more people making slow fashion lifestyle changes, whether that is mending or learning to sew or shopping secondhand or shopping small or wanting to learn more about ethical brands or not ditching a bunch of stuff at the Goodwill. These are all good things. And once again, I ask you to give yourself the pleasure of sitting back and seeing this progress, because for me, I don't know, it's the fuel that keeps me going. And I know it's really hard right now to feel optimistic about next year. And trust me, there's going to be all kinds of dark shit we're going to deal with too. Some of it is a carryover from this year, and I'm sure some of it will be brand new. But there are also these moments of promise, and we can't let ourselves forget that. Meanwhile, though, the fashion industry, right? It is as clueless and stuck as ever. I actually don't see a great year for it in 2025. And that industry is particularly just so tired, so old-timey when it comes to inclusivity. Especially when we're talking about inclusivity in terms of age, race, disability, and of course, body size. In October, Vogue Business shared a size inclusivity report based on the spring-summer 25 runway shows. And what they saw wasn't surprising, but it remains depressing. I'll share the full report in the show notes, but this paragraph really summarizes it. Of the 8,763 looks presented across 208 shows and presentations, 0.8% were plus size. And by the way, plus size for our purposes right here, just in this paragraph, is US 14 and up. 4.3% were mid-size. By the way, the definition here of mid-size is US 6 to 12. And 94.9% were straight size, US 0 to 4. I mean, I'm just going to tell you here from my intents and purposes, straight size is anything up to a 14. You may argue otherwise. I'm really sick of people who are size 6 being called mid-size even. I think there's a big difference between being a size 6 and being, say, a size 12 in terms of what you can buy and how often you see yourself represented on brand websites. And it is not fair or even accurate to group a size 6 with a size 12. Just in terms of how the industry sees you, you know? Back to this article here. Plus size representation is level with last year at 0.8%, so less than 1%. Mid-size representation has inched up from 3.7%. Okay, great. So now it's 4.3. Interestingly enough, partly driven by the use of muscular men in co-ed shows who typically present as mid-size. Oh, well, that wasn't the win that I thought it might be. Are you depressed yet? Well, how about this? There also appeared to be more straight-size models at the extremely thin end of the scale. Emma Davidson, the fashion features director at Dazed, told Vogue Business for this article, "It has felt like brands were turning their back on inclusive casting for a while, but this season, I sat in my seat a few times at shows where bigger models had been previously present, and it was so disheartening to see no representation. This season feels like the nail in the coffin." Torin Northam, who's the head of TikTok at High Snobiety, really summarized where and how the fashion industry shows itself as just being so foolishly out of touch and stuck in the past. She said, "It's sad to see an industry that made a lot of progress over the past few years revert back to the toxic, unhealthy ways of the past, but it feels like those in charge still see being thin as being beautiful and being more fashion." Okay, I added the pronunciation of fashion in that way, but I think it made sense. What's interesting to me is not what any of the stuff I just told you, because I am not surprised by it at all, and I'm sure you aren't either. But what is interesting, or maybe ironic, I guess, actually, is that even if the fashion industry feels like some clueless dinosaur churning out constant collections and showing them on skinny, young white models, I mean, seriously, I saw a high fashion billboard in Tokyo that was like rage bait for me because I saw it like 5 times, that seemed to feature a 12-year-old, 12 tops, maybe a 10-year-old, but definitely not being like portrayed as a child, being dolled up like a grown-ass woman. Just ridiculous to me. But even if fashion is just so decrepit and so out of touch, it still impacts everything we see in stores, in television, and movies, and on social media. The influencers are getting skinnier, all while continuing to show us more stuff we should buy every day. It feels so tired to me, but it's still affecting all of us. It's affecting how we feel about ourselves and how we exist in our day-to-day lives. It's also affecting what we do or do not put on our bodies. So if slow fashion is the opposite of the fashion industry, and it should be, then it needs to stop centering thin, young, white, cisgendered women in brand marketing and in social media posts, and even in the kind of content shared by the organizations within the sustainable fashion realm. Seriously, start to take a look at the content created by some of those big sustainable fashion accounts. And by the way, every time I say sustainable fashion, I am literally making air quotes with my fingers, just so you know. Start to take a look at that content that they're churning out there, because it primarily focuses on the same type of person over and over again. And if you don't fit into that box, you don't feel like you can be a part of it. And trust me, I say that because I have felt that way too. A few weeks ago, right after I returned from Japan, I recorded a roundtable discussion with some people who I think are working really hard to make slow fashion more inclusive and therefore more successful at achieving its goals. First, there's Marley, who is a personal style coach and host of Style Me Slowly, which is a podcast that shares sustainable, size-inclusive brands and their stories. There's Nico, the founder and CEO of Foria, a platform to help people find what fits their bodies, their style, and their priorities, and how we can support each other in the journey. Next is Itohan, founder of HNI Collective, a fashion service agency with a focus on size inclusivity and sustainability. There's Donnelle, the creator of the Philly Plus Swap and one of the founders of Philly FatCon. And lastly, but most definitely not leastly, someone you all know very well, Maggie Green, the Halloween queen, a clothes horse all-star by far, but also someone who works very hard to help people get dressed in a way that makes them feel their best. So just a real banger of a group here. The discussion will be coming your way in the new year, and it's such a great conversation, seriously. But first, as we lead up to that, I want to get started by giving you a chance to get to know the participants better. Because they're all doing such rad stuff, they all needed their own one-on-one conversation with me. So this week, you're going to meet Nico and Donnelle. Both of them are so smart, so thoughtful. I can't wait for you to hear what they have to say. And they both work on very cool projects that are life-changing for so many people. But before we jump into that, it's time to listen to another audio essay from a small business owner within our community, Sarah of Somersaults. I really love her audio essay because she talks about food, which honestly faces many issues of quality and accessibility that are similar to clothing. And I love how her business is working to make better food more accessible to more people. So let's take a listen.
Hi, my name is Sarah, owner of the company Somersaults. I hand make seasoning salts in Jacksonville, Florida, using fresh herbs and peppers that I either grow myself or locally source from small farmers in the area. I was captivated by your theme of community because it's so important to me, what I do, and who I am. I started this business during the COVID times, just postpartum after I'd quit my job teaching, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my time. I needed to find some community. And so I started a business to just get myself back out there again and find some people to connect with. At the same time, I was working on trying to figure out a way to get my family the local food that I knew was available, but was hard to find. So I started working at figuring out where there was farmers markets that I could go to and connect with those local makers in our community. So building community is really the backbone of our life. I come from kind of a chaotic family, and so having a community around me is what supports me and my family and my life. My small business also fits into my community because a lot of the people that I've created in my personal community are also the people that I vend with, I attend markets with, I eat food from. They are the local makers that feed me and my family. And I've really become embedded in the local food community, both because of my business and because of my love for local food that is deep down. My business benefits my community in a lot of ways. I'm providing a local, clean seasoning option, which is something that's not really available at the base level of what my business does, is making seasoning salts. But I'm also a local food advocate. I use my platform to try to bring awareness to local food options, not just in my own city, but any city that anybody who follows me is in. I really want people to consider local options no matter where they are and consider where their food is coming from and how far from the source it is. As a former teacher, it's really important to me that my business gives back to the community, again, in lots of various ways. We support local markets, we support local food. I also attend and create my own networking events. I support local charities by attending their market events, ladies' night out, donating baskets. I love supporting LGBTQ organizations and groups that support food sovereignty, especially here in Jacksonville. I love supporting local farms. I source from them. I love, telling people about eating local food and getting them from farms. So I really love that my business really does support and give back to the community in a lot of various ways. I would love to see my impact on the community just continue to grow. Ever since starting this business, I've always had a dream of being able to create a nonprofit that would hand in hand be a garden that I could use as a source of herbs for our business, and also a community outreach outpost where people could receive classes on cooking and gardening or free therapy services, because trauma-informed therapy is something that is really important to me and my husband and my family, and I think to our communities. And so creating that would be a way to create even more impact to our community over time. And I very loudly proclaim that I do things differently than a big business. And that starts from the base level of the salts we make. I use local grown herbs exclusively. I try to make sure that I'm creating a education system within my customer base so that they understand why I do what I do, and they value that some flavors are seasonal because of the way that I source my herbs. I also don't use a co-packer. I'm not selling in any large corporate grocery chains, nor do I have the intention to ever do so. I believe that slow food is the answer to fixing our food systems holistically. And so I am loyal to local as an eater and as a consumer, and also as a business owner. If you'd like to follow along my journey, learn about local food, farming, and how I make my salts, you can follow me at Summasalts. That's SUMMASALTS. I also have a website with all of my recipes, and of course, you can purchase my salts on there, and that is www.summasalts.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you look for the local option next time you need to make a purchase.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for such an amazing audio essay. I know Sarah shared how you can find Summer Salts in her recording, but I will also link to her in the show notes. Go give her a follow. Go check out her website. She has some amazing things for sale, including dill salt. Yum. And she's got some great recipes on her website today, too. I was going through the whole thing today, getting very, very hungry. All right. Enough of all this. Let's jump into my conversations with Nico and Donnelle. We'll get started with Nico.
I'm Nico Herzetti. My pronouns are they, them, and I live in Northern California in the Santa Cruz Mountains with the deer right outside my window right now.
Aww.
They're the little forest ponies. They're fantastic.
They are forest ponies. That's a good way to
They
look at
are.
it. Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, they definitely are. I'm the founder of Foria, which is an online platform to help plus size and gender expansive people build a wardrobe that is more sustainable, ethical, and that they love.
And is Foria like brand new clothing or secondhand?
That's a great question. So the way that Foria works is we list by brand, and there are links out to obviously when brands are selling new. But whenever brands are listed heavily on secondhand sites, whether that's Poshmark or eBay, or if they have a Facebook buy, sell, trade group, we will list those too. So you can find both on Foria.
That's awesome. So what motivated you to start Foria?
So I started Foria because I just tried to make a list of size inclusive brands that I knew that were also gender inclusive or gender neutral in some way. And I figured I can think of a handful of brands. And then I decided to go look for who else has made a list like this, what's out there. And as I kept looking, I would find longer and longer lists, at first from magazines, but then from folks within the plus size community itself who were trying to accumulate who is actually making stuff for us. How can we
Mm-hmm.
find them? How can we support them? The problem that I found with those lists was you really had to work super hard to find the brands that would fit your size because size labeling is so all over the place. So the example I give is I've looked at my measurements across 100 different brands, and I am anywhere from a size large to a size 6X, and none of those sizes are the dominant size. I think the most common size I came in at was 30% of the time. So, like, I don't have a typical size. And this was when, like, before I had top surgery. So I was like proportioned. I was an hourglass plus size person. So theoretically, I should have fit more things more consistently. So from that, I basically said, how can we make this easier? How can we make it easier for people to find the stuff that fits them, both their bodies, their styles, the priorities that they have, who they want to support? Do they want to support women, BIPOC owned brands, queer brands? Like, how do we make this easier? And that's where Foria came from.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I think such a good call out, the chaos in size labeling. Because I
Yeah.
agree. I mean, I tell people all the time, it literally means nothing. I actually,
Correct.
when I'm shopping in general, I always carry a tape measure in my purse for that exact reason.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad that people are having more conversations about that because I think like we tend to have a lot of baggage tied up in what that tag says. So,
That's definitely true. It's been interesting to talk to people who feel differently about this. So, folks who have been used to shopping online only for a long time are the folks who are like, I know my measurements, I know how to take my measurements, I know to look at size charts. Then there are folks who are kind of newer to this and are kind of moving into my only option is online, or more of my options are online. And there might be more feelings around that of why aren't there typical sizes, and yeah, feeling really caught up in what that size label says when you buy it. And it's it's totally human and valid to feel that way. And the more comfortable you get with the fact that this is just a matter of how much fabric is required to make the garment that goes on your body, like the easier it starts to become to accept your body and to just focus on other things of like, how do I feel my best in my body?
yeah, which is work, right? Like
Oh, yeah,
I mean, I have to have these conversations with myself all the time. So
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
very, very normal to get really wrapped up in numbers.
extremely.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, extremely. We're encouraged to, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are whole
Absolutely.
industries that want you to worry about that, you know? So you
Yeah.
have to do a lot of work there. And honestly, actually, that's another piece of what I wanted to accomplish with Foria was to normalize body diversity and normalize normal bodies and let people see what it feels like to shop in an environment where you see more bodies that look like yours and more bodies that look like more people, right? So when you are used to only seeing those size 4, size 6 models and everywhere that you shop, regardless if they carry your size, if that's all you're used to seeing, that becomes your perception of normal. Compared to if you get the opportunity to see lots of different bodies and lots of different styles, all of a sudden that becomes normal. And that's a lot more reflective of the world that we actually live in.
It's such a great call out to think about like seeing more bodies, more types of bodies, more sizes of bodies, because it really does change your perspective on it. For me, as someone who worked in an industry every day where, you know, the smaller you were, the more successful you would be, which is so
Mm-hmm.
messed up, but is the reality of even the internal culture of the fashion
Yeah.
industry. It felt I started to feel like, oh, everybody is a size 4 except for me and like maybe a few other people, and we're the problem. And then when you
Yeah.
start to be exposed to like just leaving that industry and like going out in the world, was like, oh, wait a minute, what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
and it was good. It was good for my brain.
Oh yeah. And it's kind of funny because one of the things we talked about last night was the stat 70% of American women and femmes are wearing a size 14 or larger. And often I'll say that and people are like, really? Is that real? And what I'll say to them is it doesn't feel real because when you go shopping for clothes, that is not what you see. But I sat in the airport the other day, I was waiting for something, and I just decided to like watch each person that went by me, and I could see it in the real world. I was like, oh yeah, like a good
Totally.
chunk of these people are plus size, big and tall. Like that is normal. That is what we see, but we don't see it in this shopping environment. That's where it's weird, but we don't know that it's weird because it's been this way for so long.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because like the internal culture of a lot of these brands are people who tend to be very small, and so they don't know that there's a world outside of it either, or maybe they kind of know it's out there, but they're a little fearful of it because it disrupts what has been ingrained into them. And, I'll be the first to say I'm a straight size person. I have a ton of privilege. I can buy clothes just about anywhere I want. But because I wasn't a size 4, everyone who I worked with at my jobs where we were scaling up to larger sizes would come to me as the expert on larger sizes. They would be like, well, like, what do those people like to wear? I'd be like, well, what do you like to wear? The same thing.
Yes, that is the answer. That's absolutely the answer, is that it's not, there's the same amount of diverse taste in the plus size community that there is in the straight size community. And it's kind of odd that that's often not reflected. I have a lot of feelings about why that might be, or not even feelings. I have theories about why that might be, and why it's developed that way. But one component that I think is really important to acknowledge is if you see yourself represented in fashion, those are the folks who've had access to play with fashion, who have lots of options available to them. That's who then goes into fashion. If you haven't had those options available to you, you're probably not going to go into that industry because it hasn't developed as an interest because it couldn't very easily.
Right.
And so in those fashion programs, not only do you lack plus size people, you lack plus size education. So like at our local fashion program, I literally walked into the studio and I looked at all the dress forms, and there were more than 24 dress forms. And the largest one had a 40-inch waist. That is not very big. That's like somewhere around an 18, maybe. I mean, that's not big enough.
No,
it's
I mean,
just not big enough.
That's relatively small.
Yeah, it really is. And so if those students aren't learning how to pattern and how to grade for when bodies have more mass on them sitting in lots of different ways, then you don't end up making clothes that those people are excited to buy, let alone the style component, right? Like just the fit component. We're selling these students short despite there being like an enormous market opportunity for them to break into. It's really disappointing.
It is disappointing. And a lot of my friends who work in the realm of fit and technical design will tell you that knowledge is at this point highly specialized. And if you have it, you're this like unicorn for the industry.
Yeah.
And well, good for them, right? There's always work for them. But if we know that 70% of American people, or people who were assigned female birth or whatever, are a size 14 or larger, then shouldn't really like everybody know how to grade? Absolutely. And right, it's wild to me. It's just like, oh, we're gonna focus all our energy on this like really small group of people, and then I mean, this is something I talk about all the time. Is like, okay, we have all these brands, like way too many brands competing to sell clothes to the same like 30% of people. And so they have to pull all these dumb tricks to get people to buy as much stuff as possible so they could drive sales when they could just dress more people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's rewarding bringing it into sustainability, right? So they are going to do what they have to do to keep that cost as low as possible to sell to a small oversaturated market because price is such an important differentiator, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What brands are on for you right now? If someone has a brand of their own that they would like to be a part of it, like how do they get
Yeah.
involved?
Yeah, literally reaching out to me is the way to get involved if I don't know about you already. I have been so fortunate that like the people who are using Foria are often telling me about brands that I haven't met yet, which is so exciting, and I absolutely love it. And honestly, probably one of my favorite parts of my job is getting to talk to people who are running brands, especially if they're doing it on their own. I've always loved that part of my work. I've worked for small businesses for a long time, and that has always been one of the most rewarding things. And to your first question about like who's on Foria now, um, right now I just checked it. We're at 331 brands that are listed.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. It's pretty incredible. And I have a lot more in like my lineup to vet. Because I do actually like vet them myself to make sure that we're not ending up with like scammy like brands that disappear because they were just like a you know what I mean? Like we're seeing a big rise in that kind of thing. So the focus has been first and foremost brands that are more size inclusive, and we can talk about like what that means for Foria,
Hmm.
because I think that's a term that gets thrown around a lot without a lot of definition.
Oh,
But
totally.
yeah, size inclusivity is the first and the first thing I look at. But then also like I'm looking at who's actually running this brand and how are they running it? Like what kind of choices are they making about inclusion and sustainability? So you will find brands like Old Navy or even Shein on Foria. And the reason that I do that is that I want to basically normalize all the incredible things that these small brands are doing that these huge, profitable, wildly valuable companies could be doing and are
Hmm.
deliberately choosing not to do. Because oftentimes, when you're just shopping from them in a silo, it's really easy to kind of like forget or justify or whatever. Like, oh, well, I heard this negative thing about Shein, but man, like, whatever, I really want this thing
Hmm.
versus I really want to champion these smaller brands that are like, yeah, we're going out of our way to hire diverse models that are hard for us to find, and we're paying them well because we believe in their work, and we're working with factories that we visit on a regular basis, and that allows us to understand how ethical their practices are, as opposed to the companies that are disclosing none of this information. And as you probably know, if they're saying nothing, you should usually assume the worst,
Yeah,
because the
definitely.
reason things aren't made in America is that we have laws that prevent bad things from happening that would make things cheaper, right? We've
Hmm.
just exported that somewhere else where the laws are looser most of the time. Um, so to answer your question, there's a wide variety, but I would say a vast majority of them are very small and medium sized brands that are not getting found because they don't have the marketing budgets of these bigger
Yeah.
brands. And my goal is to help them connect with the customers that are going to be super excited that they exist and are like, where have you been all my life? I'm so excited to meet you. Like, give me everything you make. That's the dream.
I mean, I love this because I feel that slow fashion, and especially slow fashion in terms of size inclusivity, well, industry is not really the right term, but like is a world that is currently shared via lists, as you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like this person
Mm-hmm.
has a list and that person has a list,
Yep.
and you know
Yep.
the reality is that the more lists you have to go around and collect in order to buy clothes, the more
Yeah.
likely you are to end up shopping from Shein, really,
Yeah.
because
It's a
it's a
lot of
lot of
work.
work. And yeah, we all
Yep.
have other things to do, right? So
Yep.
I love this idea. I mean, what did you say?
Yeah.
331?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of brands. That's a lot of lists right there.
It is.
Right. And like these brands, they don't have money to market. They get drowned
No.
out, so this not only helps people buy clothes, which is
Yeah.
great. It also helps these brands be seen and supports them and hopefully like continuing their businesses, growing their businesses, being able to dress more people, and theoretically over time pushing these dumb bad brands out of the way. You know, like that's what I want, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's definitely the dream. Like the way that you could look at the like plus size industry as a whole is like you have the big players. So historically that's your Torrid and your Lane Bryant, like those are the biggest players. And then you have the new big players who are kind of, we talked about this a little bit last night. We're kind of the plus size fast fashion giants that are emerging. It's I'm very concerned about that. I think that is something that we're going to see over the next few years be a big problem. And actually, I want to touch on, you asked about secondhand. We didn't talk about this last night a lot, but when I started working on this, my original goal was like, and the still the goal is how do we reduce people's dependence on things that are mass manufactured in unsustainable ways, right? And one of the first things I looked into was like, hey, how do we fix our clothes? How do we alter our clothes? Like, how do we keep it for longer? And the thing that I consistently found is people weren't going to spend the time or the money to fix a crappy top they paid $5 for because they didn't value it. And it was so poorly made that it would be very difficult to fix it. And so, and so the next question I asked is like, okay, well, who's invested in putting better stuff into the system? Because if you are straight size, you can go to a thrift store and find lots of options. The last time I went to a thrift store and found lots of options, it was because it was a plus size consignment store, and it was the most magical feeling because that didn't happen to me. Like that, I didn't have options to go secondhand. I had to buy new and I had to buy online, and that was really frustrating. And so what I want to see is like these smaller brands that are making things that are made to last get into the secondhand ecosystem so that plus size people have more options in those systems because they want to shop secondhand too, just like style. They want the same options as their straight size counterparts.
Totally. Like out here where I live, a lot of the thrift stores have a pretty decently sized plus size section, but it is all of those horrible brands that are like Fly By Night or Shein and are just so bad. No one wants those clothes. You know? I agree. I would love to see better options like on the secondhand market, and that is going to take some time, but where it starts is with us, when possible, supporting brands who are doing things the right way and making product that lasts. So let's talk one last thing. Let's just talk a little bit about what size inclusivity means to you, because you mentioned that. And I think I will tell you, one of the things that I still laugh to myself about is about a year ago, this sustainable brand called Woven reached out to me about being featured on Clothes Horse. And for one, I don't usually do that kind of stuff because you're like asking me to do like 20 hours of free work so you can get advertising, which what? But two, I looked at their website and I said, your clothes only go up to a large or an extra large. Like I can't have a brand on my show that is not size inclusive. And they were like, well, we are getting really size inclusive. Oh, the other thing I'll say is I added, should you extend sizing? I would love to talk to you about that. That would be amazing. So like, if you go back and you start adding more sizes, come back to me. Let's talk about it. That would be so inspiring. And they were like, well, we actually are already size inclusive because we have been adding extra large in more styles. And we just shot, this term, I hate it so much. We just shot a body positivity campaign with a larger model. And they sent me all of the photos from it. And if this model was a 14, I would be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's considered the standard for a plus size model is a 12 or 14.
Yeah. Like, I think she was more like an 8, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, like that is the plus size industry replicates a lot of the same issues of the straight size industry, right? So if the straight size industry is showing you models at size 2 or size 4, they're at the very bottom of the size spectrum. They're going to do the same thing with plus size. They're going to show the very bottom of the size spectrum. Yeah, it is an issue. So let's talk about like how I think about size inclusivity,
Okay.
because where defining this term started was frustration in getting ads that would be from a brand that said, "Hey, we're size inclusive," and they might show maybe somebody who was a little bigger than that 12 or 14, and so I would feel hopeful. And then I would go to their size chart and I would be like, "Oh, I am at the top of your size chart. I am not the top of the size inclusivity spectrum. I'm at the bottom of it. I'm what's called a small fat."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I know that if I am at the top of your size chart, you are excluding a whole lot of people in my community. And so I started to think about like, what does size inclusivity mean? And I kind of narrowed it down to a few key factors. One is the body measurements of your size chart. So not your size labels, because I literally just bought a pair of pants the other day that I was a 5X in, and their 5X like didn't like it's incredibly small. Like I've never seen something. It was unbelievable to me that that was my size in that brand. It doesn't bother me. I was mostly mad because that brand would get put on one of those lists of size inclusive brands because they're like, oh, they go up to a 5X, and I'm like, yeah, but what do they mean by 5X? So I ignore size labels when I think about size inclusivity. I think about the body measurements that you're accommodating. And specifically, the body measurements we are accommodating for ready to wear items, not just custom. So, one of the ways that brands kind of get around size inclusivity is they say, "Oh, we'll make it for you custom." And the problem with that is they won't take a return for the custom item, but they'll take a return for the
Yeah.
ready to wear. So, sure, I can get the item, but I sure as hell better love it because I can't send it back. So that would be item number one. Item number two is, who are they showing in their product photography? We talked about this a lot last night, but who you choose to hire to show off your products tells us who you want to sell to.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are not hiring plus size models, multiple of varying sizes and shapes, that tells me something looking backwards. Because a lot of brands, like you said, try to quote unquote fix their size inclusivity problem at the marketing level, like the consumer marketing level, when the problem is actually all the way back in the design and patterning and grading
Absolutely.
level.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
don't try to fix that problem at the end of the pipeline, because you're going to get people are going to be pissed.
Well, yeah. And I honestly, like, would you become aware that is the root of some of these issues? You can see it in the product photography where maybe they actually are using, a model who's larger than a size 14. Like maybe they're using a 20, a 22, a 24. It is very apparent that the clothing does not fit and the model is uncomfortable. And I can think of a few brands who honestly people love in the slow fashion space where I can look at the product photography and I'm like, that model can't sit down in those pants. That model is uncomfortable right now. That jacket doesn't close on that model. That's not inclusivity.
And maybe another piece, the last piece that I look at is I think of it as the filter test, and plus size people have experienced this a lot, which is when you have the option to filter by size, which in my opinion, every brand should have if you're not making everything in every size. Do you go from 1,000 items to 10 items for those largest sizes? Because I can't tell you the number of times that happens where a brand will tout, oh, we go up to a 6X. And I'm like, cool, show me everything in a 6X. And it's like a fraction of what they make overall. Sometimes that's because they are expanding their sizing, and that's great. Like expanding your sizing is not an easy thing because there are costs associated with that, and doing it right has even more costs associated with it. But don't pat yourself on the back just for the consumers you're trying to win over to be disappointed. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't help your brand.
I think that's a really good call out because I've worked so many places where they're like, okay, you know what? Like, yeah, we're gonna extend sizes. We're gonna add plus sizing. We're gonna do it. We're gonna invest money. I mean, we talked about this when we were recording last night too. We're gonna do it. Oh, we kind of cut corners. People showed
Mm-hmm.
up, bought things, returned it, and never came back. The conclusion is never, maybe we should give it more time. Maybe we should fix where we went wrong. Maybe we need to earn the trust of these customers who are continuously burned by other brands. No, it always is, oh, I guess just like larger people don't buy clothes. I mean, seriously, like that's what I've heard. Or they're not loyal to us. And it's like, you have to earn that.
You haven't earned that loyalty.
Right? And there's so much trauma associated with clothing, especially when you are a larger person, because you find yourself frequently, you know, having to just wear whatever you can actually find. You find yourself feeling uncomfortable often. You find yourself invisible, like an afterthought. So maybe you can't expect people to just be loyal because you tried. You tried, in quotes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, honestly, this is maybe a challenging thing to say. And I say it with care in my heart, but brands should only if you are a straight size brand currently, let's say you've been operating that way for a while, you've been successful, and you are toying with the idea of extending your sizing. I think the most important thing I would say to that brand is do not do this unless you are very seriously committed to putting in the time and the money, because everyone's going to be disappointed if you don't do that. Like, do not half-ass it.
It's
just
true.
can't.
You can't.
It won't be successful.
And you'll lose that customer forever.
Yeah,
you know,
and they will just tell everyone else. And so any future effort to do that is going to be an even bigger struggle. So I want to promote size inclusivity and encouraging brands to think about that. But honestly, the way that I usually think about it is there should be more brands that focus on the higher end of the size spectrum. Like if you're going to cut out sizes, I would cut out sizes below a large. Like I'm obviously generalizing with a size label. Focus on the higher sizes because, like we've said, that market is hungry for options, but it requires time and attention and effort to do it well. But when you do it well, because you're not splitting your attention, you're going to be able to build that trust and that loyalty by focusing on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, if I were going to just step back and look at it purely from like a financial business, like put on my capitalism hat perspective, I would say focus on the larger sizes and get them right, because that's a wide open market. And the smaller sizes, they already it's already too competitive and oversaturated.
Oh, yeah. And I can even define that a little more clearly. So like, when a brand comes and wants to be listed on Foria, if they don't go up to at least a 55-inch hip, there has to be something really special about them in another way, whether that's like because they're like super sustainable, they're a B Corp, something else has to stand out, or they're a situation like Shein, which is like at the small end of size inclusivity, where I'm like, people need to know like what the receipts are. And so we're going to list you because small plus size people will talk about you. And we want to put the receipts out there. And also like one of the things we do is we list alternatives for people to make a step away from that. So like you may not be ready to invest in like a custom piece or even like a $150 dress. That might be hard for you. Like that is a hard jump to ask people to make. But maybe we can nudge you in a direction that's like a few steps better than Shein. How can we help you find options that feel accessible to you, but are moving in the right direction? And I think that's a really important part when we talk about like sustainability and clothes shopping, is that most people are not dumping their wardrobe and starting over and saying, I will have a morally perfect wardrobe now. Most people are making a combination of purchases where they buy something that is that investment piece for the first time to figure out what that feels like and if it's worth it. but they still have like, I mean, I still wear my Torrid leggings because they're great and I love them. And I haven't bought new ones in a long time, but I'm wearing those things until my chub rub goes through them. Like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will not pry those away from me.
No, and I think that's really important. I mean, I think that like a lot of sustainability marketing is just that. It's marketing. It's designed to get you to buy more stuff, right? And
Yeah.
I think it can lead you down this path of like, oh, I guess I need to throw everything away in my life and start over if I want to be more ethical or more compassionate
so
about
ironic,
this planet.
isn't it?
I know. And I'm constantly, you would be surprised how many times a week I will hear from someone who's like, yeah, so I guess I'm going to throw out all my clothes and start over. And I'm like, whoa.
That's the
Take
worst
a step.
option.
I know. Do not do that. I can't believe you hurt my feelings that you were even thinking about it, but I think like it's baby steps, right? For all of us, regardless of what size clothes we can buy or have access to or what our budget is. The most sustainable things are the things that you already have or things that you are going to wear for a really long time. And you know that because they're what you wanted. And that was a difficult lesson for me to learn, even where I was like, I constantly found myself buying clothes that I didn't really love, that I didn't feel like trying to fix or take care of really, because they weren't what I wanted. They weren't what made me feel good. And I think
you wore them begrudgingly.
Yeah. I was like, well, this is what I could afford. This is what was available, or this is what I thought people thought I should wear. So I like, for sure, I love this idea of like helping people on that journey if they're ready for that. Have you ever had to say no to a brand? And how did that go down?
That's a good question. Let me think about it. I usually say not now. And I would say why. And I will say, hey, we prioritize brands that are size inclusive and are making strong efforts towards sustainability. And you either are not size inclusive enough to be a priority right now, or like, I need to let you know that your sustainability report card, if you will, here's how that's going to look right now, because you haven't shared a lot of information about what you are or aren't doing. Because for every brand, we have the good things, the questionable things, and the like obviously bad things, right? So that's how I've approached it, because I had this decision point where I had to decide, like, are we going to list brands that I would never in a million years give my money to, right? Because they have had issues, or they're so far down the like morally repulsive route that I'm like, I don't care what it is. I would never buy. And I kind of decided I want plus size people to understand all the options available to them so that they can see the best options available to them. And that comparison matters. So one of the things we did on that route is, I would say we're not neutral in the sense of brands get ranked on the site based on their sustainability and ethics efforts, their inclusion efforts. Like the brands that are doing more in that way are ranked higher. So the brands that are doing questionable things are at the bottom of the barrel. They're the last one you're going to see. They are never recommended to you as an alternative. We're constantly trying to promote the brands that are making those better efforts. So I'm kind of using those brands as more like, we'll list you, but we're going to show all the better options to steal your customers to better brands.
I mean, I actually really like that approach. I think to understand why these like smaller brands are worth supporting, you kind of have to see them next to the bad brands to see the distinction.
Yeah. What are you paying for here?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, a lot of it is like values, it's ethics, it's good fabric, it's fit, it's things that you will last, you know? And I think more and more that's becoming a conversation that like, hey, we kind of all get ripped off a lot by a lot of these fast fashion brands.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
I get stoked about that. I'm like, you know, I have spent like, you know, all these years now in every possible way examining how you can talk to people about fast fashion, right? How you can get them, what aspect of it is going to get them riled up about it and want to change and want to fight for change. And listen, for some people it is talking about workers, and for some people it's talking about environmental impact. But for many people, and I totally support this approach, it is talking about how we all get ripped off.
I feel like that is definitely a strong like motivator. And I mentioned this a little bit last night. Like I think that's only getting worse as like these like scammy brands on like TikTok are kind of cropping up, and people are getting literally like sent crap, stuff that isn't real, right? Or not getting sent anything at all. It's funny because growing up, like the idea of like a brand name or like a label was something that felt very like, ooh, I don't like that. That's what the rich kids do. That's not
I
me.
know, yeah.
And
But
now, I'm like, well, here's the thing. The brand is the person most in control of how this item gets put into the world, and the choices they make like are a collective choice like over time. Like you don't just switch factories willy-nilly or like switch your level of quality of like the fabrics that you're willing to invest in, right? So like I think brand loyalty now is just different, and it what it should be is a way of saying like I trust the way that you make decisions and what you offer me as your customer. Like that's what I think brand loyalty is, as opposed to it's a way it's all, I mean, lots of people see it as like a status signaling thing. That's not who I am, so I understand that people can view it that way, but another way of looking at it, if you are more like values minded and that's not important to you, like status signaling isn't important, the way to look at it is like, who can I trust in the way that they produce an item? Because I think people don't fully realize how many people are behind that thing that you've bought. It's an enormous industry, right?
yeah. No, I think we're on a dawn of some like really these conversations becoming really mainstream, but they don't become truly mainstream if there aren't options out there for people of all sizes and body types. And so that's why I get really excited about the work you're doing with Foria, because you don't want to participate in a conversation that you don't actually get to see through to its fruition.
Yeah.
And this gives people that option.
Yeah. I mean, when I started, I wanted to basically give people the option to say, like, what is size inclusive to you? Because that's what you care about, right? Like, you need to find what's going to be within, like, what's going to fit your body. But as I evolved it, like, I developed a size inclusivity, like, rating scale, because I wanted other people like you, where you're able to shop a lot of brands that start with straight sizing, right? But I wanted to give people like you insight into, like, oh, this brand is actually like at the forefront of size inclusivity. I really want to shop with them because I want to support more of that. And that I think is really helpful for folks to kind of understand where brands sit, where they have room for growth, where they're doing a really great job compared to like maybe their competitors or really just like everyone else that's out there. Like that deserves to be acknowledged in a way that people can understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like you bring up a really good point there, that this is something that people of all sizes can actually be a part of creating the change. Where like I personally don't want to work with people or buy clothing from people who only dress a tiny portion of people and maybe even don't do it well. Like it just doesn't sit well with me. So this is like, regardless of your size, an issue that should matter, because I always say that where there's smoke, there's fire. And if a brand is refusing to dress a substantial portion of people, I would ask, because I believe this, is this a symptom of some other ethical issues that you're going to find within that company? Not always, but where you're shitty to one group of people, I bet you're shitty to another group of people, right? And I think that's really important to call out, because in the places that I've worked that refuse to extend sizes, or thought it wasn't aspirational, that's the term, to show larger models or to have larger sizes, the people running those companies were literally horrible people who also didn't care about workers, didn't really care about the customers, and created a toxic culture around their brand.
Yeah. That's so disappointing. I think it's funny. I feel really fortunate that I feel that Foria has exposed me to the other side of that coin, where I have felt so much more optimism about clothing as I've gotten to know the brands that are more size inclusive, because like I said last night, I think the brands that are the most size inclusive have also tended to be the ones that care about the people who help produce their products. They are the ones who are investing in factories that you can feel good about, in textile production that is not going to destroy the planet. Like, it has been really lovely and wonderful to spend so much more time focusing on those folks, even while I know, like, the companies that you're describing are out there. I feel like I finally am in a place where I'm like, I don't have to give them any of my attention because I have so many great options in front of me. And that's a wonderful feeling, to not feel like, well, these bad, terrible companies are the only option and I have to shop with them because that's my only option. Like, to be freed from that is a really wonderful thing.
I think it is too. I'm excited for listeners to go check out Foria and maybe get to feel that way too, because I
hope so.
I have this tremendous optimism about where all of this is going, and like, I also believe that humans can fix climate change. So maybe I'm hyper optimistic. I don't care. And one of the reasons I have that optimism is because I see what people are doing right now. And I think this is just the beginning if we all buy into it.
Totally. I agree. I think what I'd like to see sustainable focused people do more of is look for, and you touched on this, look for, what does someone have to gain from participating in this, right? Like, how can this benefit them? Because when you have that inherent motivation, it doesn't become as much of a like mental battle or mental math. Like, one of the reasons we do the ranking that we do is that we heard from folks that, like, hey, I'm constantly having to do this mental math of like how much I like something, what it costs, and then like if I think this company is like ethical enough or not. And I'm juggling all of these factors. And we're like, oh, we feel that. Like, I do that all the time, right? How can we start to take that and make it a little more easeful for you? Not that you're not thinking about it. Like, you still think about it. I don't think it's the right thing to disconnect people from that, but to just clear the clutter a little bit and make it a little easier to make choices that you can feel good about in every way, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think we're getting there. It's slow.
Yeah,
I think
it is slow.
Yeah, the more tools we can offer people to make that transition easier, the better. And it just shouldn't be this hard to get dressed every day.
Yeah. I could not agree more.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nico. This was such a great conversation. And I'm excited for everybody to hear the other conversation too.
Absolutely.
Let's take a moment to thank some of the incredible small businesses who keep Clotheshorse going via their generous Patreon support. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycled clothing using only reclaimed, vintage, or thrifted materials, from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Shift Clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple, hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room. All while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Catch us at flea markets around Southern California by following us on Instagram at vino.vintage so you don't miss our next event. Dylan Page is an online clothing and lifestyle brand based out of St. Louis, Missouri. Our products are chosen with intention for the conscious community. Everything we carry is animal-friendly, ethically made, sustainably sourced, and cruelty-free. Dylan Page is for those who never stop questioning where something comes from. We know that personal experience dictates what's sustainable for you, and we are here to help guide and support you to make choices that fit your needs. Check us out at dylanpage.com and find us on Instagram at dylanpagelifeandstyle. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Find us on Instagram at Salt Hats. Gentle Vibes Vintage. We are purveyors of polyester and psychedelic relics. We encourage experimentation and play not only in your wardrobe, but in your home too. We have thousands of killer vintage pieces ready for their next adventure. See them all on Instagram at Gentle Vibes Vintage. Thumbprint is Detroit's only fair trade marketplace, located in the historic Eastern Market. Our small business specializes in products handmade by empowered women in South Africa, making a living wage, creating things they love like hand-painted candles and ceramics. We also carry a curated assortment of sustainable and natural locally made goods. Thumbprint is a great gift destination for both the special people in your life and for yourself. Browse our online store at thumbprintdetroit.com and find us on Instagram at thumbprintdetroit. Vagabond Vintage DTLV is a vintage clothing, accessories, and decor reselling business based in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. Not only do we sell in Las Vegas, but we're also located throughout resale markets in San Francisco, as well as at a curated boutique called Lux and Ivy, located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jessica, the founder and owner of Vagabond Vintage DTLV, recently opened the first IRL location located in the Arts District of downtown Las Vegas on August 5th. The shop has a strong emphasis on 60s and 70s garments, single-stitch tees, and dreamy loungewear. Follow them on Instagram at Vagabond Vintage DTLV and keep an eye out for their website coming fall of 2022. Thank you, Nico, for taking the time to talk to me one-on-one in classic Clothes Horse fashion. I told them that we would probably record for 15 to 30 minutes, and 1 hour later, well, that's how it always goes. I am so excited for all of you to go check out Foria. It's the tool that so many of you ask me for on a daily basis, so it's thrilling to know it already exists. You can search for all kinds of important things, including natural fibers, tall plus size, petite plus, gender neutral, masculine styles, and so much more. There are so many great brands on the Foria site, so go check them out. I'll link to Foria in the show notes. And if you try it and you find something new that you love, tell me about it, but also tell your friends. I also just want to give a shout out here to Itahan, who you will be meeting in future episodes. She came to the Clothes Horse Jamboree with Ruby of Spokes and Stitches, which is how I got to know her. And I reached out to her and said, hey, would you like to be a part of this roundtable discussion? I'm still kind of putting it together. But if you're interested, let me know. And then she was like, yes. And here's some other people I think you should talk to. And one of those people was Nico. I had no idea that Foria existed. I'm so excited. I've been seriously, every time someone reaches out to me in the past few weeks looking for size inclusive slow fashion options. I'm like, boop, here's the link. Go check it out. It's incredible. So please go check it out for yourself. And thank you to Idohan for changing my life. Okay. Next, you're going to meet Donnelle. And as a reminder, Donnelle is the creator of the Philly Plus Swap and one of the co-founders of Philly FatCon. And she has a full-time job. Seriously, she's taking care of business here. Let's take a listen.
Hi, my name is Donnelle Jagaman, and I'm the creator and organizer of the Plus Swap. That is a clothing swap for plus sizes in the Philadelphia area. And from that, I also am one of the co-founders of Philly FatCon, which is a convention curated for fat people by fat people.
So I don't know how you find enough hours in the day because you also work full time.
I do.
But to me, that says like, you know, you somehow make this time because you're really passionate about working on these projects. So can you tell me how you got started with the Plus Swap?
Sure. And I will also caveat that me working on these comes with a lot of privilege that I'm given from my very flexible corporate America job. And I understand that if other people can't devote this much time to these kind of projects, I have no judgment there either. You can give what you can give, right? And I also have no children, and I just had somebody else cleaning my house. So a lot of privilege there as far as like community creation and participation goes. I started the Plus Swap in 2021. Gotta like, now that we're getting further away, I have to really remember the year. And it really came to be from an Instagram community called Sell Trade Plus that I'm sure many of your listeners know.
Yeah.
And in that Sell Trade Plus, Corinne Fay, who is the like organizer of that, the admin, hosts a open thread every Friday where you can just comment and talk to other people in the community and ask for recommendations or complain about stuff or whatever. And some folks started talking about clothing swaps and just like kind of also venting that they had never been able to share clothes with anyone that they were friends with, or, you know, their sister or their family members or whoever it was, or their cousins. And after a couple of times that happened, I said, okay, if you live within driving distance of Philadelphia and you're interested in swapping clothes, send me a DM and I'll like create a group message for us. So then all of a sudden there were like almost 40 people in my DMs telling me that they were interested. And I was like, oh, okay. So, can't do this in my house anymore. This is a real big thing. And, everybody seemed so enthusiastic. And also this was just the people from Sell Trade Plus. This wasn't anyone else. Right. So with the encouragement of my fiance, who was just like, why not? And I didn't need that much encouragement. I've been doing crazy stuff like this for a long time where you just like make up things that you wish were occurred in the world. And you're like, I'll do it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guilty of that all the time. I'm like, I don't know anything about this. I'm doing it in a really public way.
Yeah. And risking my own money.
Yeah.
So I came to a conclusion of like how much money I was willing to like lay in the line of my own. And I have $500.
Okay.
And I said, if I can find a venue that we can have this in, and like that's the amount of money that I can personally lose, also privileged that I can do that. And just also a choice, a priority that I made too, as well. Then I'll organize this swap. So another friend, helped me find Bartram's Garden, which was our first location.
Oh, wow.
And we were like in the barn there. It was not glamorous.
Oh, it sounded so cute.
It does sound so cute. And the whole area is very cute, but like the barn is reserved for like, I don't know, people must like the groom's party must have been like getting ready in the barn because there were just like beer bottles everywhere from the wedding the day before. And like we had to clean all the stuff up and everything before the swap the morning of, and like nobody even knew we were supposed to be there, you know, that kind of thing. But what happened was we sold out of tickets.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So I think we sold over 75 tickets and like 65 people ended up coming or something, which is really high because the tickets were, I think, $10. And it was really like just to make sure people were actually going to show up.
Right.
You know, because of course, ideally everything would be free when it comes to this stuff. But the more, like, the bigger it is and the more you get involved and the more you had for advertise and everything, like the costs just kind of rack up. But this is my recommendation. If you want to start small with something like this, like charge $5 and give free tickets to people who need them, because then it engages people more. But sold out. It was a great success. It was like, we donated hundreds of pounds of clothing to Our Closet, which is a clothing charity in Philadelphia. There was like leftover extra, like my entire SUV was full of extra clothes. We had some raffles, just like businesses I reached out to, like Free Label and Retold Recycling. We had a coffee cart from a girl that I know who has a coffee cart. And I asked Lobo Mal, which is a Philly brand, to bring a rack of clothes to sell. And Nicole showed up with like her whole family. So it's her and her brother run the business, but like her parents were in town from Brazil and they came too. It was just a really cute thing. And so at that first swap, Adrienne Ray from Curve Conscious, which was a plus size only consignment shop in Philly, was also there. She kind of had a table full of free clothes that people had never picked up or whatever. And we've been friends for years. When I moved to Philly in 2016, I just like kept going to her shop until she was friends with me.
That worked.
We're like, I just want to be friends with this person. I'm just going to keep coming to her, buying her clothes. So before the next year, I serendipitously met Kenyatta Harris.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or no, at the second year one.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
She was after that one. So Adrienne and I had it again. I had it at Temple. Adrienne came and Curve Conscious was like a vendor there. We had Lobo Mao again. We had what is now PA Fiber Shed was helping people mend their clothes. We had more raffles, like a dozen raffles or something that time. So the second one, there was about 85 people or something, and I had it at Temple. And so we're like just continuing to grow, getting in bigger, nicer spaces, involving more people, having like a better range of sizes. And then the third year was when Kenyatta Harris joined. She at the time owned a lingerie brand. And then this all brings us to the fourth annual swap, which was at Philly, the third and fourth annuals were at Philly FatCon, which Adrienne, Kenyatta, and I all started together after like seeing the magic of the plus swap grow and just saying like, wow, we have to do this again. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was like really started at the second one. We kind of were just looking around like, they can't only be this. It's like, there's too much good stuff happening here. So the third and fourth swaps were with Philly FatCon, and have just gotten bigger and cooler ever since.
So what did you learn from your first and even second plus swap that, I don't know, like you didn't see coming, right? Like what, was there something that really sticks out to you as like, wow, I was like not aware of this, or I didn't see the scale of this issue or thing that people are thinking about?
There's definitely two things. One's logistical and one's more like social. Okay. So logistically, I was just not as aware of accessibility issues.
Wow. I mean, that's an important learning.
Yeah. And I like picked places that you could access by a wheelchair. But at the time, I wasn't really thinking about like also having places for people to sit down. And like, it just came really after the first one when I realized that like people were serious about this and about coming again, that I was like, oh, now we have to make sure that everybody can come if they want to.
Yeah, totally. And I do think, I mean, for anybody who's listening to this who hasn't had any kind of event, whether it is a clothing swap or some sort of meetup or, you know, class or what have you, it is really important. And these are kind of things you learn by doing, unfortunately, unless someone tells you, to have places for people to sit down, to have places where people can sort of have less stimulation, also, and like decompress, because it can be very overwhelming. And, these aren't the kinds of things that you're going to learn by like Googling ADA compliance. They're like, it's like a softer skill, I guess I would say.
Yeah. And it's also harder and something you have to try more to ensure occurs for your event when you're working with, a lower budget. If you think about the most accessible places and the most accessible events, they're the biggest and they have huge budgets and they're in like brand new spaces.
Yeah.
And I am trying to hold this event in the oldest city in the country.
And in a barn.
Effectively. Yeah. And I'm trying to only spend as much money as I can make. And I'm trying to, not spend my own money doing this. But having to put up my own money at the beginning. So, like whether or not you make the money back at the end, like there were still other costs that I didn't think about too. Tickets and extra bags for people that forgot their bag and whatever it is, like just little stuff like that. But then the other thing that I learned doing this was something you mentioned, is that we may have all had this experience of not being able to find clothing that we liked, or, having limited financial accessibility to plus size clothing. But some of us have a more emotional reaction to finally being able to do that than others. I didn't realize, even though I've lived this experience, how emotional it was going to be for some people, where you literally had people crying.
Wow.
And just like overwhelmed that there were clothes for them to try on and that they could even try on the clothes. Yeah. But then also some people just having like sensory overload and overstimulation issues. So just taking the individual into account when doing this, but balancing that with like all the difficult stuff that comes with planning big events.
Yeah. I mean, I think that someone who has never thrown a clothing swap, or perhaps has never even attended one, this is actually quite an undertaking. It really is to throw one. It's not, it sounds like people just show up and dump bags of clothes on the floor and everyone digs around and then everyone leaves and it's very seamless and it cleans up after itself and there's no chaos, but there's actually so much labor involved and money, I think, that is really important too. As we're talking about this, I'm thinking about something that I was reading recently, which was Kathleen Hanna's autobiography. And something she writes about in there is how, in the 80s and 90s, I mean, this is still true today, in order to be like punk or an artist or an activist, you kind of have a certain level of financial privilege, or it seems to, unfortunately, it's really hard to do these things if you don't have a certain level of financial privilege, because these things require a lot of time, they require resources. And if you are like, you don't have a lot of resources to draw on, you're working like a minimum wage job, you are like barely getting by financially, these things are really hard to do. And so I always like want to remind people that this is hard work and it's risky, which is not to deter people from doing it, but rather for people to just recognize this sort of like invisible labor.
Yeah, that's kind of, why I started off the way I did when I introduced myself, with saying that like there is a lot of privilege in the fact that I could do these things. I have a corporate job that is very flexible with my hours sometimes, and other times I was like just in LA for 3 days and I had no control over my own time. Yeah. Right. So that's a give and take thing. But I also, am in a financial position where I can invest the upfront dollars to do these events. And I'll tell you that space costs so much money, way more than you think. Like And I'm now also in the process of planning a wedding. But so like the sticker shock of that is like nothing compared to what we saw for Philly FatCon, to be totally honest with you.
Oh, I bet. So let's talk about Philly FatCon, because this is like a plus swap on steroids, because there are even more things to consider. Did you have it at the convention center?
No, we wish that we had it at the convention center, but unless I can cut a check for like $50,000.
Totally. Yeah. No. And I think that's a really good call out, because when we were doing the Closed Horse Jamboree, people were like, why don't you just do it at the convention center? And I'm like,
casual.
Yeah, just no big deal. Oh yeah, I'll definitely do that. Let me just sell everything that I own so that I can put down the deposit, you know?
Guys, my cars aren't even worth that much money.
Exactly. Yeah. So tell me like the challenges that you faced there.
Sure. The first year of the Philly FatCon, we had it back at Temple, where I had the second clothing swap. Mm-hmm. And it was actually my fiance's idea to look at universities in the first place when I was looking for a swap place. Yeah. He worked in higher education at the time, or he had just finished and he was in law school. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea, because maybe we could like even partner with a student organization, get it cheaper. Was never able to do that. Right. Still wish we could. But that was, it is very bare bones though. Yeah. Like there's no like event coordinator, like, you know, they just kind of set you up in a room and leave you for the day. So the first year of Philly FatCon, we did it back at Temple, and part of it was very accessible because it's a university and they have to be ADA compliant, at least to like the minimum extent. Yeah. And then we were supposed to have the second Philly FatCon at the University of the Arts.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Tell everybody what happened with that. Wow.
So we submitted all of our paperwork, a very large deposit, and we're planning to have Philly FatCon at the Arts University in Center City, Philadelphia on South Broad Street this past October. And in order to accommodate that, we also picked a specific weekend that was not convenient for us in our personal lives. Like it was my birthday weekend.
Oh, geez.
And it was like other stuff was going on. Right. So we went with it though, because it again was affordable because it's an educational institution and they were willing to work with us. And we were going to be able to grow Philly FatCon there and have like more vendors and more seating for people, which is just like always an ask. And then especially accommodating fat bodies was like even more important. Mm-hmm. And then a couple weeks after we gave our deposit, the University of the Arts, without any notification to anyone, staff, students, anyone, closed immediately.
Like they were like, hey,
like upon the announcement.
Yeah. It was not like, hey, just FYI, we're going to close in a few months or even next week.
We're not going to like finish this semester out or anything. Yeah. Just closed. Yeah. We never heard from them again.
Wait, so you didn't get your deposit back?
No.
Oh my God.
So to this day, they have over $2,000 of ours.
Wow.
That we will never see.
What a nightmare.
Yeah. There are creditors far more important than we are.
Right.
Including the students. I hope the students get their money back, and I hope everyone gets their wages back, like paid, that they're deserved as well. And I'm sure that the lawsuits are going to unravel. But we were just told, like by the event coordinator contact, like I gave your information to the accounting. I'm sorry if they don't do anything with it. This is my last day. Like never heard from them again. So we had to scramble, and this is like, remember the three of us are not event planners.
Right.
And two of us have full-time careers.
Right.
And Adrienne used to run her consignment shop and had since closed that down. But we had to scramble to find a new location in Center City, Philadelphia, because people had already booked at our hotel block. On that weekend, we had already booked speakers and performers. We had already almost signed. We didn't at the time sign, thankfully, a like welcome party location or the location for our costume party or anything else. But imagine trying to find a venue in wedding season in Center City, Philadelphia for as little money as possible to accommodate like over 200 people.
I mean, I had no idea that this has happened. So I'm sure, like, what was the time between like losing the venue and the actual event date? Like, was it like 3 months, 4 months?
So I think they announced they were closing in early June.
Oh my gosh.
And the event was October 18, 19.
So like 4 months.
Yeah.
And like, just for any of you who've never had to plan a wedding or any other kind of event, this is nearly impossible with that short of a window.
We gave ourselves 1 month to find a new location before we started unraveling, right?
I like that. I like this plan. Okay. Wow.
But we begged, borrowed, pleaded, toured a million new places, right? Like, which is all money and gas and hours and time and emails. And I had originally seen that William Way Community Center was nearby.
Okay.
Because there were still some space restrictions with the University of the Arts where, like, I wanted to have another fitness room location. So we were exploring, like, options nearby. And I contacted William Way, and they agreed to host us and discount the fee since they knew our money was locked up in the University of the Arts.
Wow.
Because at the same time all this is happening, we're also trying to fundraise money.
Right.
For sponsors. But how do I accept thousands of dollars or even $500 from a sponsor when I can't for sure tell you where the event is going to be?
Yeah, that's terrifying. I don't know how. It's just incredible that it all fell into place because this is a nightmare. Yeah.
It was a nightmare. And I think we found out about the closure on like a Friday afternoon. We literally couldn't do anything. There was nothing, like, you just had to sit with it all weekend and be like, maybe they'll still let us have our event there. Just like trying to have a little hope. So for those of people who did go to Philly FatCon and are listening to this and maybe didn't understand, even though we tried to communicate all this, the limitations of the venue and why we picked a venue that only had 2 restrooms, this is why.
Wait, like, only 2 restrooms?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, still, at least it was a place. Like this.
Yes.
The fact that you all were able to make this work is no small feat.
Thank you. Thanks.
Incredible. And it's just interesting to me because I feel like the University of the Arts, like you're saying, like maybe there could have been a chance that you could have still done this. Because as far as I know, it's just like all those buildings are just sitting there empty.
Yeah.
It's shocking.
So there was like this hope in my mind that they would like hire some outside event people to like run the events so that they could make the money from. Right. We weren't the only event scheduled.
Yeah, it's wild. It's sort of like they were like, we don't actually want to try to make up any of the money we owe people, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just give up.
So eventually we had to give up on that idea. And William Way was very generous with the time and space as much as they could be. But it obviously wasn't the ideal, like we wouldn't have picked that. Right? If we had another choice.
No, of course not.
We wouldn't have picked a place that was like old and, you know, 2 bathrooms and whatever the other problems, thin hallways, you know, like we heard it all in the feedback about the event. And I'm like, guys, remember, this was not our choice. This was like either William Way or no Philly FatCon.
Right.
Especially because like, everyone thinks, I think, you know, we get suggestions for places all the time. What about here? What about there? And it's like, all they suggest is a place that's one giant room. Mm-hmm. But then everyone wants us to have content like panels and fitness classes and a VIP room and a place for people to relax if they're overstimulated and the marketplace. And it's like, we don't need 1 room. We need like 7 rooms.
Right. I mean, this is what makes it difficult, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even like, let's just say you were renting out the convention center because you won the lottery. Like those spaces are sort of like modular where they can break them up so that you can do that. And that's a special situation.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's made for that. And there's, you know, dozens of restrooms and there's catering on site and all that stuff. Right. So it was great. We were able to expand the number of people who could participate in the panels, like to watch them and to watch like the keynote speaker, because the ballroom at William Way was rather large. But it was also the same space we got for the swap, which was smaller than the year before. So there were just like a lot of give and takes with it this year. We still got to have fitness classes. We still had tons of, multiple panels, a keynote, and a workshop by NAFA, and 5 different fitness classes. I think I said fitness classes, but 5 different fitness classes. And our marketplace was like in the lobby of William Way, which is tight.
Yeah.
Like our vendors were squeezed in there. And again, we had originally booked a place where we could have had 50 vendors. And I think we ended up with under 30.
I mean, just the fact that you were even to be able to do 30 is pretty miraculous. And
yeah,
I mean, you really pulled it off.
But also kudos to all the vendors that like put up with the like corner that we had to stick you in or whatever, and like being so close to everyone. I'll say like the community really comes together, and I know that not everybody was super happy with it. Not to mention all the street closures. So
my God.
planning these things, there's just nothing goes right ever,
Yeah.
But it has been a really rewarding thing to do, as hard as it is. And we've definitely been taking a break for the past month and a half or 2 months, and trying to just like save up our personal energy and our patience and, toughen our skin back up for the next round.
So you're definitely going to do it again in 2025.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where do you think you're going to do it?
We have some ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is we do want to have it close to Halloween, because the costume party is like one of the favorite things that Philly FatCon is. And, we still have to have the clothing swap, and we still have to have all these other things. It will always have a clothing swap, as far as I'm concerned. So we have some ideas. We're waiting to hear back. It's kind of like we tried to get some inquiries out before the holidays, but it wasn't that long between like the end of the convention and then the beginning of Thanksgiving breaks, for people.
Right.
So it's been a little slow hearing back from people this time of the year.
And so, I know you said you're going to do a swap at Philly FatCon. Do you think you're going to do any plus swaps outside of that? Or is this just going to be, it's a once a year and it's part of Philly FatCon?
So last year I introduced the slow fashion swap, and that was in the spring, or not last year, but in 2024 this year.
It feels like last year. I get it.
It does feel like last year. I'm honestly in my brain already in like mid-January.
Yeah.
But we, when I say we, I mean me, will likely do the slow fashion swap again in the spring, where it's much different if you've been to Philly Plus swap than the Plus swap, where the slow swap, we do like an item for item trade.
Oh, okay. And so how does it work at the Plus swap?
Oh, it's like a free for all.
That's so cool.
We like, what was nice is this year the volunteers sorted all the clothes.
Oh, wow.
But previously, like, the participants would come in and put their clothes on the designated size tables, just like 16 through, 40 or whatever the highest size we get. Mm-hmm. There's no stopping. We don't say no, it's too high or whatever. So this year volunteers did all of that, and it was so much work. It was so much work to sort all these clothes. Sure. I didn't know if we were going to get it done before the swap was supposed to start, because I don't store clothes before the swap or after. You only bring it the day of.
Oh, wow. And then they had to sort it.
Yes.
Wow.
Because I don't have anywhere to put, I barely have, like, that closet is like full to the gills that you see behind me. I know nobody else can see, but like, I don't have room in my house, and nobody does. And we
Nobody
don't have
does.
funds. We don't have funds to like rent storage spaces for your clothes or whatever. And like, nobody wants like a bunch of smelly clothes, because no matter how much you ask people to wash these clothes, you get musty clothes at the clothing swap.
Yeah, no, it just happens. It happens.
Yeah, it's fine. I get it. Like, it's just from being not worn or whatever. But you don't want that in your house. So I make everybody bring it the day of. And that does cause some chaos. But now there's so many people who have been every year that they really know how it goes. So we put all those clothes on. Nobody can swap until we like say go, right? And you just take whatever. You have to bring, usually I say you have to bring 5 items. Honestly, if you email me and you're like, I don't have anything to bring, I'm desperate, I just need clothes. Okay, just show up. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, that'll be funny.
And then you can take as many as you want that will fit your personal person.
Right.
I have not caught anybody taking clothes and reselling them or anything yet. I know everybody is like doom and gloom about that, but I truly believe our community is not doing that.
I do.
Don't prove me wrong.
I know. Don't. I want to believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at the slow swap, it was much smaller. I think I capped it at 20 people. I had it at Maid Institute this past spring. And essentially everyone laid out their items and they were numbered. Everybody numbered their items like 1 through 20 or whatever. And you went around and filled out a bid slip. So I made this up. So if it sounds like a terrible idea and you have a better one, send me an email.
I want to hear about it.
So you filled out like a sheet of all your items. Like 1, Eileen Fisher silk top. 2, Pamut apparel pants. 3, Universal Standard t-shirt, whatever. And you put the sizes and whatever. Then you numbered your pieces accordingly. Then everybody had like a browse period, right? Where you go around and you look at all the stuff. Then you come back and you fill out, if I wanted, Amanda, your Universal top, Standard top, I would fill out a little bid slip that said, like, my personal swapper number. This is the clothing item that I want from you, and I'm willing to give you any of these things of mine. So then when we start swapping, you have this little pile of bid slips that you sort through, and you see what you're interested in other people's stuff, right? And then you just start going up and being like, hey, will you take this? Or maybe you'll take something else of mine for this. Or what if I give you this and $10?
Wow.
You know, if it's something that's like an uneven trade.
Right.
I think it worked really well.
I mean, I like this idea, actually.
Yeah.
I think it also encourages more like interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
And when I hear people who have never been to a swap express their fears around it, one of them is that their fear that it will be uneven, that they'll show up with all this really nice stuff and then they'll leave with some stained sweatpants.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get that, right? Like
I do too. Yeah, I do too.
I totally get it. And I think that this alleviates that and it ensures that people can leave feeling good and have things that they want.
Yeah. And especially, I wanted to do it this way for the slow fashion. We used Lucky Sweater's list of slow fashion brands. As just like they have a pretty comprehensive list, right?
Yeah.
Style Me Slowly also has a really comprehensive list. And so anything that was on the Lucky Sweater, any brand that was on Lucky Sweater, you could bring. And that was considered slow fashion. Or me-made items, like if you crocheted or knitted a sweater or something. So I wanted to do it this way because I think that for those items, because they're such an investment sometimes. And like, even if that pair of pants doesn't fit you, they might have cost you $150. And like, you can't just toss them in, especially like with the return policies on some of this stuff. You might have never worn it. And you just couldn't send it back to Canada.
Yeah. I mean, that is a really good call out. Like in a swap of this nature, you are probably more likely to find things that have never been worn because it is so challenging to return these things.
Yeah. Oh, there were, at least I also participated in this swap. I don't usually participate because I'm like too busy. But in the slower one, being smaller, I think we had 15 people at it. I got to participate, and I think every single thing that I had on my table or my portion of the table was brand new.
Oh, wow.
And it was just stuff that I had never been able to wear.
That's amazing because,
Yeah.
I mean, there was a study that came out a few years ago, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was something wild. Like the average American woman has like 12 items in her closet that have never been worn ever. And it starts with things like this, right?
Yeah.
And it just ensures that like someone's going to get to wear it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it did end up that way. There were people who were like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this. I've been wanting to try this brand. I never got to try it on. People that needed to size up, and then they found a new pair of jeans that was the right size or whatever. And I really want to do that style again.
I think it's a great idea.
But it does have to stay smaller.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, imagine if you had to go negotiate with like 50 people.
Right.
It's too much. But I think this is incredible because, one way that I unwind is by, creeping around on Reddit and in different Facebook groups, especially Facebook groups that are focused on specific slow fashion brands. And so often people are like, I bought this thing and I can't return it. It doesn't fit. Does anyone here want it? And I'm glad that those groups exist because usually things do get rehomed, but this is a much larger issue. I mean, across the board, we know that like sizing is inconsistent, and slow fashion brands are no exception. But the difference is that they cost more money. And so it feels extra tragic and so disappointing when you buy something. You saved up your money for this, you took this risk, you're trying something new, and then you got it, and it's just like not even close to fitting.
And it's a lot of work sometimes. Like, I'm obviously clued into all these places to resell clothes, but I will not create one more freaking account or download another app.
Same. I'm cool on apps. Yeah.
So, I belong to Lucky Sweater. I'm on Sell Trade Plus, like whatever. But it was so nice to take the whole pile and be like, this is it. Yeah. Help me exchange this. Help me turn some of this over, and there were like, some people like, oh, well, give me 2 things for this one thing. Cause everybody has this like value sense in their brain. And I think in this community, we all have an understanding and appreciation for it. Like when you own slow fashion items, what the level is. Yeah. So that's why it was easier to also just say only slow fashion. So there wasn't like mixed in, what are we calling the in-between? Is there an in-between?
I mean, there really like low-key isn't,
Yeah,
like,
right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I feel like Universal Standard is kind of in between.
They are kind of, I mean, they're definitely not slow fashion, but...
Yeah. But they kind of slide,
Yeah, like sometimes they use better fabrics. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. They're kind of in this nebulous space, but there aren't many brands that I would put in that space, really. It is kind of weird. They are in a weird zone for sure.
Yeah. We do let them slide. Universal Standard, if you're listening to this, we're letting you slide. But we're watching you because I see how many new items you're putting out lately.
Yes, that is exactly what I was going to say. It is like nonstop new stuff and nonstop sales all the time. And those are red flags to me. So we're keeping an eye on you.
Yeah. For sure. Even though I'm wearing Universal Standard right now. And it's like most of my wardrobe.
Yeah.
But that's because, and this is such an aside to our conversation, but when you wear the size that everything is based off of, like I wear a medium there, and that's where they start grading everything. It just freaking fits.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good place to be.
So,
Yeah,
it's
true. It's true. I assume all those people who wear like a size 4 are like living their best lives because every brand is graded off of them, right? Okay. So, one of the takeaways from this conversation is one, we are keeping our eyes on Universal Standard, but the other one is this stuff is work and it is hard work. And sometimes you lose your venue like 4 months in advance. And I mean, you have to this is hard work like physically, but also mentally. And yes, sure, you have privileges that allow you to be able to do some of this, but like ultimately, what really keeps you doing it is you. Because you could just say, instead of doing this, I'm going to get really into miniature golf or something, you know? And because miniature golf is great. Not best really here in PA because you only have a few months. But like, what keeps you motivated to keep doing this work? Because honestly, with what you dealt with Philly FatCon this year, this is a worst case scenario. Like the only thing that would have been worse is then there was a hurricane.
Yeah. Which the road closures were close to the equivalent of,
I'm sure,
to be honest
I'm
with
sure.
you.
Yeah.
A lot of it really comes back to why I started doing it in the first place. And a lot of my motivation to get into slow and sustainable fashion is because I actually have an undergraduate degree in environmental studies.
Okay.
And a lot of my motivation for the swap was to keep clothes, especially those that are good enough to go to someone else, out of landfills. You know, knowing that everything at Goodwill like barely ends up on the shelves, and you know, we have a hard enough time like going thrifting anyway. So that's continually motivating, especially around the swap. It's like, let's still make sure that everybody, you know, knows about these brands and we can save some of these brands, because we do have vendors at the swap, and we try to have, my goal would be that all the vendors would be sustainable fashion, like thrifted, vintage, or like slow fashion. We haven't quite got there yet, but that is a huge continual motivator for me. When it comes to Philly FatCon and like the multitudes of work that involves, that it's way more than the swap. I love connecting people. I love like the fact that I know somebody who does XYZ, and then I can connect them with the person that does ABC, and that they can create something totally different and new. And that happens so much with Philly FatCon. And when you start building community around you, whoever you are, when you start getting to know people and have not just not just friends, but acquaintances and people that have the same passion. Maybe you're not like personally friendly with each other, but you know, you share a common interest. I love that stuff. Like, I love that someone was able to be signed by a manager to be an actress because of Philly FatCon.
Yeah.
Right. I love, you know, that it also brings and gives people like a sense of joy and accomplishment to participate in it. I love that we had authors signing their books there and people getting to meet the authors, that different artists get to meet each other. And even like the people that I meet through this work and me being able to make personal connections with them, keeps me going. So for example, Ruby from Spokes and Stitches and I don't live that far apart. And I, noticed on my Buy Nothing page that someone was giving away an industrial sewing machine.
Yeah.
Did she tell you this story?
No, but I can foresee the ending. Tell me more.
And the person was like, I know that, you know, this is like such a particular item. So if you know anyone else like outside of our group, I feel like we can break the rules for this, because our group, our Buy Nothing is very serious.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like no outside you had to live in our geography thing, but they're like, this is such a unique, like specific thing that like not anybody can just use. So I immediately messaged Ruby and was like, this person is giving away this industrial sewing machine. Do you want it? Do you want me to put them in touch with you? And she was like, yes. And the other lady was like, yes. And so now Ruby has a second industrial sewing machine.
Wow.
And apparently it's one that she's been looking for like 10 or 15 years or something.
Yeah, she was posting like all sewing machines low key look the same to me. Maybe they're like a different color or something. But she was posting about it, and you could see that this was like very exciting.
Yeah. So that stuff, like that happens all throughout the year because of Philly FatCon and because of the Plus Swap. And I'm obsessed with that feeling.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I think that like Now more than ever, well, we've always needed community and connection, but I think that maybe for a while we forgot. And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean you or me, but just like the collective we kind of went more insular. And the reality is like, especially for me as someone who's always been kind of like a loner, community has absolutely changed my life for the better and really like opened me up to like life's potential.
Yeah. I mean, even I think, Adrian and Kenyatta and I are all actually friends too.
That's amazing.
And I don't know if everybody knows that, but they were both just at my holiday party.
Cute.
And Adrian and her wife are coming over for Christmas Eve. So those, doing something and obviously keeping friendships alive while planning events is also a challenge. But being able to do that and actually like have even closer community than just, acquaintances and stuff. I mean, not to mention, like, it's just feel good. Like, when you go to these events and you see how happy people are and how relieved they are and how free they feel, it's like, yeah, we got to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. The more, the better, right? I think my challenge for me, my personal challenge to myself for 2025 is to stop being such like an introverted, agoraphobic person and get out and meet people more like IRL. Because when I do it, I'm so happy. I'm like fearful of it. So I'm trying to get over that.
Well, I bet you will.
I think
just keep hanging around us.
Yeah, totally. That's what I just need to do. I just need to force myself out. Every time I go out and hang out with people, I'm like, that was amazing. I should do that all the time. Then I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, what if I get cold?
We all have those moments where I'm like, what I always say is, who was I when I said I was going to do this thing? Because it wasn't who I am right now.
True.
But then, I really try to keep up with all the commitments that I make. So I end up going and having a great time. And I would actually say that to everyone who has thought about coming to an event, whether it's the Plus Swap, Philly FatCon, your, conference that you had, or literally any other meetup or social gathering, is like, just show up.
Seriously.
And if you don't like it, you can leave immediately.
Right.
Because you're a grown person.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, even like for me, like sometimes we belong to a co-working space in town. And sometimes I'm like, let's just go to the happy hour there. Like, it's just that simple. And, if we get there and it's weird, we can leave. But like often it's like trivia or something. It ends up being really fun. And I'm like, wow, I'm so glad we just like saw other people and laughed with them. And I think there's something really, I don't know, like curing about it. Like when it really cures what ails me sometimes to just
we are social beings.
Yeah.
And I would also say, as many conversations that I have and people ask me about being a community builder, I always say, there's no community unless you come. Like I can schedule events and book meeting spaces and create Eventbrites and whatever. But the community doesn't exist unless you actually go to it. So if you're looking for community, you have to participate or you won't ever find it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. That's exactly right. Like, and once again, you can try it. And if you don't like it, you can leave. But I bet you will like it.
It's that easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was so lovely. Do you have any that was a pretty good note to end on, but do you have any other final words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Go to the event. Like I just said, I think that's perfect. And also if you are missing this in your community, you can be the one that makes it happen.
Yeah.
You don't have to know anything about clothing swaps. We can send me an email. I'll talk to you on the phone for 30 minutes and tell you everything you need to know. Like you can do it yourself. I promise.
Yeah, you can. And listen, I'm a person who constantly is like, I'm going to put together a 2-day convention or do a live episode or all these other things I absolutely knew nothing about. And somehow I do it. So,
and it works.
It works. Yeah. Don't be afraid. And if it listen, you just went through the whole thing where literally the worst case scenario happened. And it still worked, And I think that's important to remember that maybe you throw your first clothing swap or community event and there are only 2 bathrooms and that's okay because next time there will be 4.
Yes, absolutely. Go out there, create community, participate. It's going to get better and better.
It is. It is. If you're enjoying this episode, then this is a great time to remind you that my work here at Clotheshorse is made possible by the support of listeners like you, just like NPR, and these great small businesses. Please go give them your support. Blank Cass, or Blanket Coats by Cass, is focused on restoring, renewing, and reviving the history held within vintage and heirloom textiles. By embodying the love, craft, and energy that is original to each vintage textile as I transfer it into a new garment, I hope we can reteach ourselves to care for and mend what we have and make it last. Blank Cass lives on Instagram at _Cass, and a website will be launched soon at blankcass.com. Located in Whistler, Canada, Velvet Underground is a velvet jungle full of vintage and secondhand clothing, plants, a vegan cafe, and lots of rad products from other small sustainable businesses. Our mission is to create a brand and community dedicated to promoting self-expression, as well as educating and inspiring a more sustainable and conscious lifestyle, both for the people and the planet. Find us on Instagram at shop_velvetunderground or online at www.shopvelvetunderground.com. St. Evens is a New York City-based vintage shop that is dedicated to bringing you those special pieces you'll reach for again and again. More than just a store, St. Evens is dedicated to sharing the stories and history behind the garments. 10% of all sales are donated to a different charitable organization each month. New vintage is released every Thursday at wearstevens.com with previews of new pieces and more, brought to you on Instagram at wear_st.evens. That's where St. Evens. Country Feedback is a mom and pop record shop in Tarboro, North Carolina. They specialize in used rock, country, and soul and offer affordable vintage clothing and housewares. Do you have used records you want to sell? Country Feedback wants to buy them. Find us on Instagram at Country Feedback Vintage and Vinyl, or head down east and visit our brick and mortar. All are welcome at this inclusive and family-friendly record shop in the country. Republica Unicornia Yarns, handmade yarn and notions for the color obsessed, made with love and some swearing in fabulous Atlanta, Georgia by head yarn wench Kathleen. Get ready for rainbows with a side of giving a damn. Republica Unicornia is all about making your own magic using small batch, responsibly sourced, hand-dyed yarns and thoughtfully made notions. Slow fashion all the way down and discover the joy of creating your very own beautiful hand-knit, crocheted, or woven pieces. Find us on Instagram at Republica_Unicornia_yarns and at www.republicaunicornia.com. Picnic Wear, a slow fashion brand ethically made by hand from vintage and dead stock materials, most notably vintage towels. Founder Danny has worked in the industry as a fashion designer for over 10 years, but started Picnic Wear in response to her dissatisfaction with the industry's shortcomings. Picnic Wear recently moved to rural North Carolina, where all their sewing and accessories are now designed and cut, but the majority of their sewing is done by skilled garment workers in New York City. Their customers take comfort in knowing that all their sewists are paid well above New York City minimum wage. Picnic Wear offers minimal waste and maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. Cute Little Ruin is an online shop dedicated to providing quality vintage and secondhand clothing, vinyl, and home items in a wide range of styles and price points. If it's ethical and legal, we try to find a home for it. Vintage style with progressive values. Find us on Instagram at Cute Little Ruin. Is there a little bit of Italy in your soul? Are you an enthusiast of pre-loved decor and accessories? Bring vintage Italian style and history into your space with the Pewter Thimble. We source useful and beautiful things and mend them where needed. We also find gorgeous illustrations and make them print-worthy. Tarot cards, tea towels, and hand-picked treasures available to you from the comfort of your own home. Responsibly sourced from across Rome, lovingly renewed by fairly paid artists and artisans, with something for every budget. Discover more at thepewterthimble.com. DecoDenim.com. Deco Denim is a startup based out of San Francisco, and it sells clothing and accessories that are sustainable, gender fluid, size inclusive, and high quality, made to last for years to come. Deco Denim is trying to change the way you think about buying clothes. Founder Sarah Mattis wants to empower people to ask important questions like, where was this made? Was this garment made ethically? Is this fabric made of plastic? Can this garment be upcycled? And if not, can it be recycled? Sign up at DecoDenim.com to receive $20 off your first purchase. They promise not to spam you and send out no more than 3 emails a month, with 2 of them surrounding education or a personal note from the founder. Again, that's DecoDenim.com. Thank you to Donnelle for spending some time with me. I'll link to Philly FatCon in the show notes, along with the Plus Swap. For those of you who are not familiar with Sell Trade Plus, I'll also link to that. Donnelle referred to it in the Plus Swap origin story, and it's a great resource for finding awesome secondhand clothing in larger sizes and meeting new people who are part of the slow fashion community. It's awesome. It's been around for years now. Go check it out. Okay, one last thing before I finish this up and run some final holiday meal errands. I don't know about you, but it's impossible to hear what Nico and Donnelle are doing and not to feel like things are changing in a really good way. There's super smart and talented people making it happen. People like them, people like you. And what they are doing is so different from what we're kind of sold every day, right? It's going back to the top of this episode. Fashion is trying to sell us the same old bullshit, low quality clothing, an endless parade of trends that ultimately kind of mean, nothing. All, of course, in sizes 0 to 12 at best. So, the fashion industry is only dressing a subset of people. Good job, guys. It's just so stupid and tired. That was the past, okay? We need to look at that as the past. And it's fine to go visit dinosaurs in the museum, but we don't actively live like dinosaurs in our day-to-day lives. I mean, I do like to go outside and stomp on things and eat grass, but beyond that, right? The future is what so many passionate, talented people are building within the slow fashion community right now. A few days ago, I was chit-chatting via text with a friend who has her own slow fashion brand, and we were talking about how hard it is to find our place within the existing sustainable fashion universe. And yes, I did make air quotes with my fingers once again when I said that. But my friend, she's young, she's thin, she's beautiful. It's a lot easier for her to find a place in there, but she feels disenchanted with where it's going, what it prioritizes. And I told her how I almost always feel like an outsider when I'm involved in some of the larger events. I'm too working class with my gnarly cuticles. Don't even ask about my fingernails. These hands are working, okay? There's my imperfect teeth, my scuffed up shoes. I'm neither a young, beautiful influencer nor a fashion professional with luxury brand experience. I don't have a law degree or an MBA. I don't even own a business suit. Let's not even get into how my personal style is usually not a match for these gatherings. But I also told my friend that I think real change will happen thanks to all of us who are on the outside of the current standard in sustainable fashion. Because that sustainable fashion, it's too aligned with what fashion currently is. And it's not making a lot of progress. I mean, let's be honest, it's just really not, because it doesn't have the critical mass of people that it needs. Meanwhile, all of us, we're solving problems in new and innovative ways. We're building new things that actually change lives, like clothing swaps and brand directories, and we're sharing information, and we're teaching people how to mend and sew and upcycle, and we're hosting community events, and we're teaching other people how to do things while we're at these events, and we're just getting people really amped up to be a part of something, because they are a part of something. Right? This is a community-driven movement. I said to my friend, I wish we could just build a big coalition of people who get shit done because we have the talent and motivation to do it. Like, how do we just get everybody working together in perfect alignment? How does this happen? And she said, sure, I agree, but how do we do that in a way that ensures we aren't taking on even more unpaid work and getting completely burned out? Touche, right? Because here's where it gets sticky. A lot of the biggest names and organizations within sustainable fashion exist and get the attention from all of us because they have money and they have access to more money. They're working with brands, big brands with a lot of money, right? They aren't running an organization and working a full-time job to support themselves. They aren't selling their clothes so they can fund their podcast like I did, or working 16 hours a day to do everything on their list. And that's the part I'm still trying to figure out. How do we pull together? How do we lead this revolution? And how do we not totally destroy our minds and bodies in the process? Because I see people leaving. I see small businesses going away. I see ethical brands going on a hiatus. I see people saying, I'm just stepping away from this. It's too much. And I respect that because this stuff is exhausting. I haven't figured out how we do this, how we tighten up this community. I guess that's the ad. I don't know how yet we build this big coalition and we get shit done, right? But it's on my mind. The limitations that we face, as far as I see it, are money, time, and physical endurance. There's no shortage of passion and talent within this community. I don't know how to fix things like giving us more time, money, and physical endurance. You know that meme that goes something like, I won't tell anyone when I win the lottery, but there will be signs? Well, you'll know that I won the lottery because I will be helping small businesses for free. I'll be creating a foundation that teaches people how to sew, mend, and do laundry. I'll be figuring out how to create a network of free childcare, and I'll finally own a home, and that home will include a huge barn for stray cats. That's how you will know that I won the lottery. But until that lottery money comes in, I'm left with figuring out how all of us who have often been unseen by fashion create a better world with only some limited resources and our own talent to get it done. I know there's power in numbers. I know there's incredible passion and expertise within these numbers. Now we just have to figure out how to get it organized. I'll keep thinking about it, and I hope you will too, and we'll talk about it next year. Thanks for listening to another episode of Clothes Horse, written, researched, edited, hosted, all the things by me, Amanda Lee McCarty, a person who now has proud access to running water in my house again. If you liked what you heard, please leave a rating, a review, tell your friends, all that stuff. Subscribe, it's the standard spiel. If you're looking for some Clothes Horse merch, you can find it all at clotheshorsepodcast.com. If you'd like to support my work financially, you can learn more about that in the show notes, in my bio on all the social media platforms, and at clotheshorsepodcast.com. And of course, lastly, never leastly, thank you to Mr. Justin Travis White for our music and audio support. I'll see you next week for one last episode of this year, and it's going to be a fun one. Bye.